I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli is on vacation, but Andrew Kuo does not take days off. Mr. Andrew Kuo, how are you on this gorgeous sunny Tuesday afternoon?
It's been a wild ride. Amazing, first of all. Thank you for asking. Second of all, I was dripped out in yellow and gray, in a yellow and gray outfit, feeling like my best 2021 self. But according to the magazine Esquire, I should be in navy blue. So I tore off these warm-ups like breakaways, about to enter my living room like Bernard King. Now I'm chilling in navy blue. So pretty amazing overall.
I think you need to give our loyal listeners, especially Patreon subscribers, obviously, a little background on what you're referring to. You are the Pantone King, as many people call you.
Right.
The artist in residency. What's happening here with the color of the year?
So Pantone every year declares a color of the year arbitrarily. I don't know. Is it BC, big color? Are they trying to push us in a specific direction?
Like they're trying to move yellow and gray paint, is what you're saying.
Yeah, CC, the color conspiracy. But they said this beautiful warm shade of yellow and this also warm shade of gray, this chromatic gray, were the two colors of 2021. But today, a buzzy article was dropped by Esquire saying, it's not the time to express yourself with color. We have to go basic and monochrome. And the time for self-expression could have been 2019, 2020, the beginning maybe, but 2020, this year is all about just blending in and not creating a ruckus.
I thought Realtree was the early candidate for the 2021 color.
Is it a color? It is a color. Like
sure.
Bucatini splatter is a color, right?
It definitely
if it exists, it doesn't. But if it did,
digital camo, Realtree. Those are the ones that I see in the news these days.
It certainly isn't all over print.
So again, let's just go back to this. You are in favor of the warm yellow and warm gray. Like you believe that is in fact, as Pantone has alleged, they are truly the colors of 2021.
There are certain color combinations that I think are funny and that I love, and yellow and gray has been a corner three of mine for a few years. I love that combination.
Kind of like an older hard-boiled egg.
A very old one that you should not eat.
Perhaps 1,000-year-old egg.
Yeah, but the yolk isn't yellow; it becomes like brown. Have you ever had one of those?
I've seen them. I've not
good.
tried them.
They're okay. They're shocking when they arrive at your table. The smell is unmistakable, but the flavor is not bad. Sort of like durian. When it hits your mouth, it's not what it smells like.
Look, I'm gonna say, navy blue. Don't have a problem with it. That's an unobjectionable color.
If it was beige, what color would you have an objection to? Is there an offensive color?
Yeah, I don't really think I have any skin in this game. Announce it's a color. Sure. Lime green. Wow. That's crazy. Sick.
But it could not be red. Like, it would not be okay if they said it was red, right?
For me, no.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot accept red as the color of the year.
Yeah, but in a vacuum of just the color, it is the color of the year, right? But symbolically and politically, it cannot be. I don't know. I don't know. Red doesn't look good.
If they said it was red, I'd be like, fine, dudes. You're the experts. You're the Pantone Kings, like Kuo. I don't know.
Pantone is a fucked up company because they have tried to corner the market on, defining color. Like, this is yellow. There's always the debate that I have between a dark orange and a light red. I'm like, I can't tell the difference. But Pantone swoops in, and their whole business model is to tell you what is dark orange.
But what is their business model?
They do color correction. I mean, they originally started color correction for print. So if you wanted to have like an exact color, a spot color, it was a standard of which printers and designers and everybody involved in production could standardize this thing. So there was no kind of miscommunication with a dark orange or a light red. But
We've cornered the market on magenta. Like, you want magenta, come see us.
or it's like, this is not the magenta I wanted. Be like, but you said the Pantone, so therefore it is the standard. So there's no gray area. No pun intended.
Seems helpful for everybody, to be honest.
It is in theory, and it isn't, because the colors of screens are all different. The calibration of monitors. If you print in humid weather versus dry weather, it changes the color. It depends on what paper you have. What lighting are you looking at? It's all different. So Pantone is helpful just to get a start, but don't expect it to look anything like your color in the end.
Yeah, keep that in mind, listeners.
Those Pantone books used to be expensive. The ones where you tear the little they look like acid tabs. It was a rave. Basically, every design studio was a rave. Everyone was high off their mind on Pantone.
I feel like we should mostly just keep this a pod about Pantone, color schemes, the coloring industry, how the colors shift depending on the humidity. Like that could really be our focus, because, the NBA is in shambles.
Well, it's funny you mentioned like your ideal pod, because if someone hypothetically told me or asked me who my dream pod guest would be, I'd be like Joey Pantone.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I noticed JJ Redick's pod. There's a few other guys on it. I think they had Malcolm Gladwell, cultural anthropologist.
10,000 hours of homie. A bro. One of those 10,000 hour bros.
They talked about their dream pod. Like, who would their dream pod guest be? And rather than regurgitating their list, I feel like we should just come up with our own, right?
Yeah, they had a solid list. I had no objections to any of those names.
I think Malcolm X would be great on their podcast.
Mm-hmm. All right, you go first.
Okay.
This is the podcast guest big board.
But this is also for Cookies Hoops, right?
This
Just
is
to be clear, this is not like someone else's pod. This is our pod. This is the most influential basketball pod we're talking about.
If the law of physics went out the window and we could have any of these people on Cookies Hoops podcast, the most influential pod, this is specific to us.
Yes. Okay. All right. I'm going to go right away with Abraham Lincoln.
Whoa, that's a strong pick.
Yeah, I think he'd be great on Cookies. Like, he was like really popping, a while back. And like, what's he been up to?
I mean, save it for the pod, but I would definitely ask him what's up with the hat.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's like the small talk, but like, what happened? You know what I mean?
He was
like what? Like, no one's heard from you in years.
right.
Like, what's good?
He's tall, man. Could he slap glass?
I think he'd be great for the basketball part, for exactly that, because like, what position would he play today? Like, I mean, is he
a tweener? Is he
kind of a
positionless?
He's kind of,
He has to be positionless, right? This is his whole brand.
See, this is why Abraham Lincoln would be a great guest on Cookies.
Amazing.
Who do you got? You got anybody else that you
Okay, number 5. We're counting down.
Oh shit. Okay.
Martin Scorsese. The Knicks day one. Who is more New York than Scorsese? Okay, like, he would tell us everything we're doing wrong below 14th Street, how downtown used to be better in the 70s.
Like when it was mean streets.
And it's that big enforcer energy that I want to kind of embrace on our pod, talking about Charles Oakley and Robert De Niro just not letting any funny business in the paint.
Like some real Jordan originalism is what you're looking for.
And also about his cameo in The Sopranos, Remember when he goes into the club and what's his name? I forgot his name. Is like Marty, I love Kundun, and it was funny because he got his first role. Go get your shine box. Why am I forgetting his name? The young guy in The Sopranos. Oy.
Chris?
Yeah, maybe.
Chris Moltisanti?
Yes, that was the one. I'm blanking today. I'm just so
You've got
into this
You've had
list.
so much gabagool.
Endless gabagool because there has been not enough bucatini in my cupboards.
All right, I'd move on. I think that'd be cool, but really, after Abraham Lincoln, I think Kim Cattrall would be a really good guest, especially right now. You know, with Sex and the City coming back, and like how would that work without Samantha Jones? Also, would love to get into her work with like Steve Guttenberg on Police Academy. I just feel like in general, she's got a lot of tea to spill.
Yeah, and also we can ask her about the six in the city. Who's the best six man on the Sixers this year? Who should be coming off the bench for the Sixers?
Yeah, she could get
Should
into
it be
like
Shake? I don't
or
know.
is it Tyrese?
Yo, this is what Kim Cattrall, because she has time now to totally divulge her take, these hot takes on the Sixers.
Who else you got for the perfect pod?
Oh, number 4, John Legend. Just incredible. Well, he's multifaceted.
Yeah,
I don't know.
super talented.
I don't know if you know this, but I watch The Voice. And he has kind of taking the reins as the good guy on that show. I mean, it is a life-affirming, if not religious, Christian show, but I enjoy watching it, and it's always on in my house. So
Do you think he's not getting enough takes off on that show?
he's getting takes off, but he's known as the one with reserve. I mean, the name says it all. He has nothing to prove.
That's a good one. Very good one.
Thank you.
I would go with Kobe. I think Kobe coming in third.
Baller.
Like I don't think he'd be good for the first part of our show where we talk about like mostly dumplings and dumpling related tours around Chinatown and
But what about the Italian food discourse?
the Bucatini's talk would be good. But honestly, I want Kobe. I want his take on like the COVID bubble. Jamal Murray, Donovan Mitchell, 50-point games in the first round. What does he think about LaMelo Ball? Like big future, right? Like I think Kobe would be great for that.
Kobe, is Bradley Beal the real deal?
Exactly. Like who right now wants it the most?
DeMar DeRozan.
He wants it.
He wants it.
Who else you got?
All right, number 3. Fran Lebowitz. Just
Oh.
so incredible. Can you imagine her on Cookies Hoops?
Oh my God.
We're just peppering her with these complicated questions about our city, the hoops, fashion, and her response is just so solid. Is everything stupid? Oh, you like this basketball player? Well, I think he's stupid. Oh, you like that food item? Stupid.
Just taking you down with pithy remarks. You are a glutton for punishment.
Waiting for that punchline. It's like it's not the moment you eat the ravioli slice. It's the moment right before you eat the ravioli slice.
The
So
pregnant pause, the anticipation.
waiting for Fran Lebowitz to deliver some sort of punchline is great because it never comes.
I just want her to, just like tear us down to size.
Put us in our place. It's still the boomers' world, man.
My next one, and I think that's a really good one. I think Allah
Oh,
would
huge.
be good. People will go with
Allah
Jesus.
Abdel Nabi?
No, I'm talking about like the big dog himself, like Allah.
Yeah.
Because Jesus, that's predictable. Oh, Jesus on your pod, yeah, no shit. But like Allah, don't hear much from him. I think he could straighten stuff out. Like, are you Team Shia? Are you, Sunni wave? Like, I don't know. I just think Allah could bring a lot to the pod. Maybe he wouldn't really be good in the basketball part though. But still,
But you
I
never
think,
know. I mean, life is ball, right? Ball is life.
Yeah, I think Allah would be okay. Who else you thinking?
All right, number 4. This is we're getting close to number 1, but number 4, number 2, I guess, in reverse. Pablo Picasso.
Oh, Yeah, yeah, I could see this. But you're the artist. Why would Picasso be such a good guest on Cookies?
Well, I would definitely want to know, like, he's one of the legends. I would want, as well as John Legend, but I would want him to kind of talk to me, frankly, as someone who tries to live in his brain sometimes, how the Gasol brothers control the paint and how they're kind of underrated as all-time players. And we talk about your guest Kobe Bryant all the time, but Pau did work in the paint, and so did Picasso. So I think he would have a lot to say about that. Could we get that done in 2 hours? I'm not sure. It might have to be like a pod series with Picasso.
I could see that, like the Guernica of pods.
Ricky Rubio, is he Cubist?
I like this. This is a good one.
Yeah.
And my final one this is the key, the one that I want on the pod the most. Celtics coach Brad Stevens.
What? That's insane.
Why?
No, no, go off. I'm insane as in insane.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I mean, imagine just getting a chance to, I don't know, pick the brain of basketball's foremost genius. Just like the honor that would be.
That's interesting.
So, like, that's my list. Like, I got Brad Stevens number 1, Allah 2, Kobe 3, Kim Cattrall 4, Abraham Lincoln 5.
Okay.
So who's your like top dog?
Well, I really like your list. And it doesn't make me second guess mine, but my number 1 is Brad Stevens too, man. What? This is incredible.
Oh my God.
No wonder this is the most influential pod. 2 Ps, man.
That is crazy. That shows how our brains really just like melded together there with the BMM and brought us both to the same natural conclusion.
Do you want to be the warm gray or the warm yellow? Wait, I should be the yellow for sure. I mean, gray is kind of everybody, but Brad Stevens, man. Well, I really want to pick his brain about the NBA game and safety protocols and how he wants it more, especially like in a time when we're all isolated. How he feels about isolation and isolation plays on the court. I have to step back in my life to reevaluate the things that are important to me, and he asked Jason Tatum to step back for every play too. So I think we'd have a really great conversation.
I like what we did there. We came up with basically 5 perfect pods, and so we'll try to make those guests happen for you guys.
10 perfect. Well,
10,
9
10.
perfect pods. But you can have your Brad Stevens pod where you ask him about the nuances of the game, and then I can have my Brad Stevens pod where I ask him about the nuances of the game.
It's perfect. Like the pods. I mentioned Kim Cattrall quo, and got some bad news for the Sex and the City fans. They're apparently doing a relaunch, a reboot, however you want to term the comeback of iconic New York series, Sex and the City. The city in this is New York City. The sex is with the main characters. But instead of the quartet, now it is down to a trio because Kim Cattrall, who hopefully will be on Cookies at some point, is not going to be part of the return. How do you feel about that as a Sex and the City maven?
Kim Cattrall is the only sex positive one in a show called Sex and the City. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know. It made me think of, I told this story once, shout out to a friend of the pod, Kat Marnell, when I went to see the Libertines. And I'm like, I don't know. Can they be fun without Pete Doherty? The Pete Doherty had already pulled the Kyrie Irving and left the band indefinitely. And the Libertines were playing a Fader Fort party at Milk Studios, I believe. I was psyched. It was the peak of that run. And they were awesome. And did I miss Pete Doherty? For sure. Like, no one really... The energy went down by 50%. But the songs were still their songs. So, as a Sex and the City Day 1, I think Samantha will be missed. But at least we get more of the show, right?
I've watched a lot of the early ones in that I've never seen the movies. I don't know how they bring the plot together. I guess Mr. Big died. Is that right? I don't know. I haven't seen the films. But I did watch a lot of the ones when they aired initially on HBO. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good show. It had a nice concept and yeah, I have no beef with it. But like I'm not like some snide dude shit like Sex in the City. It was a good show,
I watched it on HBO for sure.
but not sure how that dynamic works without Kim Cattrall in there, without Samantha Jones. She was, as you said, she was the one who was sex positive. She was the one who was kind of interesting.
Yeah. And not to say that we wouldn't be interested in the other three, but like, does Seinfeld work without Jerry? Probably.
It's also what you were saying. It's the show is Sex in the City, and she was the one who was about sex the most.
She did stuff, and the other three kind of reacted. And I don't know. I saw the second movie. It was about Dubai. The world kind of changed on that show, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It kind of makes it more interesting, especially, like, I don't know. The more tone deaf something is, the more interesting it is. Like, I definitely think a traditional Sex in the City season in 2021 could be more interesting than like Fran Lebowitz, because Fran Lebowitz is the tradition, and Sex in the City was kind of like, it just feels maybe like a subculture at this point.
There's also nothing inherently flawed about, three beloved television characters catching up to them where they are in their life at this point and setting it in New York City if the writing stands up to it. Like, it's not, it's a vestige of the past. Maybe some of the jokes were there when it'd be like, analingus, what? I'm like, yeah, millennials.
Yeah.
That gag is not working right now. But if you set it now and you update it to where they are and make it, I guess, like age appropriate for them and what they're dealing with, there's no reason the show couldn't be great, like theoretically.
Yeah, I mean, these are still three people that are interesting enough. It could just be like rearranged, right? Like, the Celtics and the Heat are out of the NBA for a night. It's like, well, we'll just watch another game. It's not the same because we can't rip on these players or celebrate these players, but
like Samantha died in 9/11.
That'd be wild. They leaked a little bit like it would just not address her, but I don't know what that means. Like, it's a storyline that doesn't include her, which is fair. It could be like she's still in Dubai. I don't know. I forget what happened in the Dubai movie. I was trying to think of sequels or movie adaptations to shows that were as good. I love the X-Files movies, but I know those were roasted a bit. Like, would a Law and Order movie work? Because these shows kind of are more procedural than some are more procedural than others, but Sex in the City was such a nice show, right?
Well, I just want to go back to your Law and Order point there, was that a Law and Order movie probably would not work because by necessity they would be compelled to talk about the lives of the cops themselves, which are never the most interesting part of Law and Order. Like, Law and Order works as a police procedural because it follows essentially a strict 44-minute timeline. Like, here's a dead body. They
There's
find
a
a
joke
dead
about the
body.
dead body. Yeah.
They learn some stuff. They question some people, and then there's a court case.
And then Ed
that
Bagley
out-
Jr. admits that he did it.
it was Whoopi Goldberg and her.
Martin Short. We knew
adopted
you were
kid.
here for a reason.
Exactly.
You're just not emotional support.
Like, we had to wait an hour and a half to find out that it was Martin Short.
All right, I did it. It's like,
We knew he wasn't just the guy pushing carts at the grocery store. We knew it.
Oh, I'm his little brother.
Martin Shorter.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring this up with you and Jason Concepcion, aka Network, who was on the pod a couple weeks ago in a great show. I forgot to, and maybe it was because I was intimidated. There was a lot of talk about, do short women, this is off Twitter, of course, do short women know that part of their appeal is that men can boss them around?
Where is that? I've not heard that.
It was a take. Someone put it up, and
Was it a viral take or?
it was a viral take that everyone made fun of.
Okay.
But that was her point, was that the appeal of short women, which they refuse to acknowledge themselves, is that they can be like bullied by men, that men can tell them what to do.
That's a dark thought, but like, I sometimes think that about like if you go into the dating apps, the appeal of Asian women is really high. And
Because of the perception that they're submissive?
I don't know, but like that's the first take that happens when people mention that take, you know, and or that data. But I don't know. I would maybe push back against that too. The idea that bullying somebody is appealing.
I mean,
then I'm a
I think
Knicks
it's a
fan.
preposterous idea.
Yeah,
that-
I'm trying to
that
think
people
about
say
it.
I would like to date this person who's short because I can like physically intimidate them. I just that doesn't seem like it would cross anyone's mind, let alone be a reason to date them. But here's where I'm going with this quote: Is there short culture?
Speaking from someone who is 5'5", Earl Boykin's height, I have not been able to identify short culture. I've looked, I've searched my whole life, but like Antifa, it might not exist. But let's say,
Well, I was gonna say, as someone who's 6'2", I just might not be attuned to short culture.
let's see the benefit. See, I was too late for all the dating apps, so I can't really identify with that community that way. And on Twitter and Instagram, there is no like physical categories. You know, it's just like whether you think the Knicks are fun or not.
Are there certain things you'll say only in the company of short people?
Nope. Have I ever called anyone shorty? Is what you're asking. I have not. But I love get your booty to the polls. That's my favorite line in that whole video that changed our country.
I mean, if I can't get something off of a shelf, is that short culture appropriation?
Yep. And if I use
Yes.
yep. And if I use one of those hooks to get something on top of a shelf, that's tall people.
And honestly,
your culture is my costume.
I hate when you do that. I think you should have to call me and let me come do that, because that's what us talls are here for.
Yeah, maybe I would
Cabinet retrieval.
maybe I would want Darwin on our pod to talk about this. I mean, he would be cool if he just dropped in and he was just like, there is middle culture of people who are not short and not tall. They're centrists.
And
I'm
we're
try-
all just trying to appeal to like that fabled 5'8" person.
We all aspire to be 5'8"-ish, 5'9"-ish. We don't want to grow 2 inches in the off season necessarily. I would love to, but you would not. But this brings up a kind of more interesting, or equally as interesting.
It's definitely not more. It can only be equally as interesting.
A viral tweet that I read months ago that I forgot about like Asian people hating on other Asian people and Asian men kind of sabotaging other Asian men. And I had never noticed this, but this person went into it saying that like there is some sort of self-loathing that comes into it, and Asian men do not support people of their ilk in America because like the opportunities are so slim.
Do you think that's true?
No, I've never seen it ever in my life. And I have many Asian friends, some who come on this pod and record classic episodes.
Classics.
Cookie
Classics.
Soups. Yeah.
Classics.
But I had never seen that. I disagree with some of my Asian friends, but it's not because they're Asian. It's because they think the Knicks are they should fire James Dolan.
Is it kind of like white rappers? They have to always come out and diss every other white rapper. Like that's just kind of the rule. Like Eminem is here, he's got to take down Milkbone. There's only room for one. It's like Highlander.
Right. If Jeremy Lamb joined the G League Golden State Warriors, and he, you know, is a fine shooter, great decision maker, maybe not the best handle in the world, on the cusp of rejoining the NBA, you better believe Jeremy Lin would pay attention.
That was equally as interesting.
I mean, like, do I hate Andrew Yang?
I was about to
Absolutely
say,
not.
like, I was about to say, you love Andrew Yang. You're not trying to tear him down. You're trying to push him into the mayoral seat
Listen, there's
with a
photos.
boost.
There's photos of him in a trench coat, and he's talked about the Smiths, and he likes the Knicks. I mean, we disagree on the Knicks minutia. Let me get that straight. But, hey, man, am I trying to cancel Andrew Yang? Hell's no.
He's working on that himself. So in an article in the New York Times, Andrew Yang, who's, I guess he has announced that he's running for mayor, or he is probably going to run for mayor.
He filed the proper paperwork at the deadline. He's not announced it yet.
So that's the background here. So he did an interview in the New York Times, and one of his quotes got people annoyed at him. And I'll just read it to you first, and then we can get into it. Noting the challenges of fulfilling his CNN obligations from his apartment, he continued, quote, "We live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. And so, like, can you imagine trying to have 2 kids on virtual school in a 2-bedroom apartment and then trying to do work yourself?" End quote. People didn't like that.
At all.
Why not?
Because I think we're all more Fran Lebowitz than Andrew Yang in New York City. So it's that big day one, locals only energy. And not being here during our darkest time is kind of like a dividing line between us and our friends. And as a politician, he should have known better, but he's not a politician. So he's going to make these mistakes. It does not bother me. But
I think there's 2 issues here, right? I think the quote itself got people annoyed because they said, a 2-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Like, and I think a lot of this is linguistic, right? It's the word imagine, where he's almost using it in a conversational way, the same way you would say damn or wow. Like, wow, trying to have 2 kids on virtual school in a 2-bedroom apartment and trying to do work yourself. Mm-hmm. But people looked at it like, can you imagine how insane that is, without imagining that that would be a better situation than a lot of people are in? Like, he's in Manhattan and has 2 bedrooms. Like, he's living like a king comparatively. And I think that's what people gravitated to from that quote specifically.
yeah, and it's never, especially, there was a thing earlier in COVID when people were trying to decipher everyone's, background on their Zooms. Like, what books do you have? This room looks kind of, is that a chandelier? Is that a salad spinner? And I think the transparency of people's financials is something like we'll never get to, because the people who have been mayor in New York have a lot more money than Andrew Yang. Bloomberg, for example, and he was reasonably popular. He was voted in. De Blasio was not here for his entire childhood. He was in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So it kind of, when that quote dropped, among my small friend circle, I'm known as the Andrew Yang enthusiast. And I got a lot of texts that day. And I was like, it always feels like people are digging at me for standing with an Asian guy. It's just like, you just like him because he's Asian, because he's really lousy. And I'm like, no, I agree with all of his policies, and I love the way he thinks.
You're an Asian named Andrew who likes the Knicks. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
But the big difference is I stayed in New York during the coronavirus, and I think the Knicks are doing fine, even with the losses they've sustained this week.
I have sympathy for that quote because he's actually saying what everyone else agrees with, that it was really hard to have kids in a New York City apartment. And people are kind of being like, yes, but you're in Manhattan and you have 2 bedrooms. Like, it's people drawing class delineations about a quote that is acknowledging how hard it is for everyone. So I didn't view it that same way at all, really. Like, he could have said it in a way that would have been more easily digested by people who were looking for those kind of little schisms and things, But again, to your point, we've had billionaire mayors. Yeah. He's not wealthy by the standards of many people who are in office. He's not like, he doesn't have Elizabeth Warren money.
Nope.
he doesn't even have, honestly, I mean, I don't know what he makes from CNN and doing, talks and things like that, but I don't think he has like investment banker money.
No, yeah. I mean, he's famously not. He's rich compared to us, but he's not that rich compared to that world. And like he didn't strike it big in tech, but I think you're right. It's a language issue, and we're going through this with like, is this trespassing? Is this a riot? Is this an insurrection? Are you Antifa? Are you not? It's always a question of language, and he is not good at the politics part of being a politician. So he's going to put his foot in his mouth because he's not good at this. And I think what he meant to say is like, I have to go on CNN and I got screaming kids in the house. So like I can't be in a 2-bedroom apartment because they would just be screaming over my work. And which I understand. Like if I have a very loud cat and when I do cookies hoops, I have to lock that cat up in its cage with the interns. But what he's saying is understandable. The way he said it is a mistake because he's running for office.
Right. I'll defend him on that. But I will say, I do find being upstate in Poughkeepsie area, where I believe he's been, like an hour and change away from where he lives in Hell's Kitchen, for the last 9 months, I actually find that disqualifying. Like, I know this is boomery, and, I'll get the dry rub out and the tongs, but, hey, man, you bounced. Maybe it's time to just cool out. I'm not saying you're eliminated from mayoral contention forever, but right now, like at this moment, when you're still upstate and you've been there this entire time, might not be the appropriate moment to say, let me run the city now. Like, just doesn't feel quite right to me. And I know this is not necessarily about politics even, but I kind of just want a mayor who was here. And in the darkest hour over the last 100 years or so in the city, I kind of want someone who was like here when all there was that glowing, red siren on top of the Empire State Building. And the only sound was, ambulances whistling over the bridges. And I want someone who was here during the summer when there were Black Lives Matter protests. And I want someone who was here when Times Square sprang back to life and looked like the Gothic Quarter in Barcelona. And I want someone who was here at McCarran Park during the election parties. I don't know. It just feels like you weren't with us shooting in the gym, man. Like, take a seat at the Pine, earn your stripes back, because he could have been very present. And I know that would have conflicted perhaps with what he was doing for CNN. And it didn't make sense for him to be here the whole time with his family because that's really hard to do. And he did have a house upstate. I don't begrudge anyone who left. It's cool. It's cool. You wanted to jump on a plane and go somewhere else? It's cool. You went to Tulum? Cool. I have no ill will. My shaming reservoirs have been emptied. I don't care what anybody did. I'm not even annoyed at him for leaving. It's all good. I'm just saying, while being in Poughkeepsie, talking to the New York Times about how you want to be mayor, not into it. I know, again, I'm saying I know it's Ewing, face punchers, just doesn't feel quite right. And I'm not going to hold him to a different standard than other guys, other women, other mayoral candidates.
That's not happening.
No, I'm saying with this.
Okay,
I'm not. If someone else left, I would say the same thing. I'm just only speaking about him. And it almost speaks to your point, how unsavvy he is on this. Like, he could have just gone back and forth. It's an hour and a half away and been around and done stuff.
I think he's unsavvy because he loses people who think, and I understand this, like, I don't need my president to be a war hero. I don't need my president to have been into politics or a senator before being president. I don't want my president or anyone an elected official to necessarily have to have carried that lunch pail at one point. Like, if you're good at your job, you're good at your job. So authenticity means so little to me here when these people in office do so much. And I think it was a big error for Yang to give that quote because he'll lose people who want something from him. And I just don't care because his ideas are pretty awesome, I think. Like, paying stay-at-home parents a wage, valuing people who lose their jobs. Like, his whole platform is protecting families, right? And I think those ideas are better than him being like, I can do my job in my 2-bedroom house, and people being like, well, or rather, like, you weren't here when we suffered the most. And I'm like, oh, I don't care, because that's, in my opinion, that's not a data set that reflects his empathy, whatever you think that is. I don't care about day ones. I mean, if the Knicks could just get LeBron James on the team tomorrow, I'd be happy. They don't have to draft him. He could have played for 5 other teams. I don't care. He's the best player.
I hear all this, and honestly, I think my take on Yang not being here runs counter to how I typically feel about basketball in that way. I just think this was a really traumatic time, and I do think there is some gravitas about seeing how New York went through it and being here for it, and then wanting to run it. Like, that he was not drawn to be here. He just chilled. And, you looked at his Instagram in the summer, there's like one photo that's like, it's not even a protest. It says Vigil in New York. He's not in New York City, and he tagged it in New York. He's clearly in an upstate town, and it's an ambiguous photo. So he kind of knew he was fucking up. Yeah. Like, he didn't say in New York City. He didn't say in Poughkeepsie. He said in New York. He left it very vague about where he was. And then, like, 2 days later, he's on a camping trip with his family. Looked lovely. Like, all good. Nothing wrong with going on a hike. Just got All Trails app, do your thing, dog. But I'm saying he could have made that effort if he was thinking about running for mayor. And I feel like he could have made up a lot of mileage and a lot of ground for someone who does not have experience in government, as someone who has never won an election. He could have come down here and been around and kind of earned those credos of someone who's been, and he has lived in New York for 20 years. He's legit. He's lived here. He's a New Yorker in that way. But he didn't kind of do the work leading up to this. So I almost am like, well, you went down to Georgia and you were on CNN. You took your family down there, but you didn't come back and stay in New York City? I don't know. It's just tough for me to reconcile that with someone who, like, has the heart and the desire and the instincts to be mayor, like, right now.
This is the exact criticism Ben Simmons gets. And by no means is Ben Simmons or Andrew Yang perfect as a candidate or power forward. But I can't even name the other candidates that are, like, vying for this mayoral job. But Andrew Yang is going to suffer the greatest scrutiny of all of them, regardless.
He's going to get the most scrutiny now because he is the biggest name. Like,
biggest
at this
name,
moment.
and also divisive because he's Asian, and it's new. And this whole idea, I think this is a lot of his criticism is a dog whistle to, like, however America or New York thinks about an Asian man, and I think that can't be ignored. His policies get laughed at, but they've aged very well in the last year, unfortunately, right? Awful things happened to our country, and his ideas somehow survived, and that's the worst case scenario because we did not want to get there that quickly. So now we're just moving the needle, or we're moving the goalposts on him, being like, okay, fine, we've decided UBI is not the worst idea in the world, but you're not a day one. And I'm like, he's Ben Simmons.
I could not agree with that analogy because Ben Simmons is, like, great at what he does. Yang, we don't know. He could be a good politician.
Well, to get to this point, he's great at what he does. Like, Yang is an all-star in the NBA now. He is a viable candidate for the mayor of New York City. Like, to get to this point is not easy, right?
But also, like, again, I'm going boomer here. Like, his what he has done to this point does not reveal that he wants it enough. Right? Like, he wasn't here. Like, AOC, she was here.
Is he keeping New Yorkers honest?
He's not. I mean, AOC, she was around. Bowman was around. Max Rose was around. And again, I'm not saying I won't vote for him.
AOC was in D.C. She splits her time, right?
Yeah, but there's plenty of stuff with her in New York and being around because she was up for election. So she had to be here.
Right, but she literally wasn't
here. Something rubs me the wrong way about him just sitting up there, being on CNN, every day, but not driving an hour and a half and being around. I could be wrong. Maybe he
there's
really
something.
was. Maybe
there's
he was
something
around.
for sure. And there's something about Yang that rubs people the wrong way.
This
without
is not
a doubt.
about this is specifically about someone who went 9 months, from what I can tell, about having any toehold in New York and then saying, also, I want to be mayor now.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't dig that shit. And it's not about him. It's any one of these guys. If one of these, banker-friendly Wall Street schmoes is like, hey, I'm going to run, and I've been in the Hamptons for 9 months. Like, same shit. And again, I like Yang better than the
Whoever. I don't know who else.
like
is
Eric
running.
Adams, the Brooklyn
Right.
police chief. Like,
Would
fuck
you
outta
rather
here.
have him than anything?
No, of course not. So again, I'm holding everyone to the same standards. We're just talking about Yang because of this article.
Yeah. I mean,
That was really politically unsavvy, man. You did the interview from Poughkeepsie. Are you dumb?
but he's an unsavvy political voice, right? Like,
Is that who you want to be mayor? Again,
I have no problems with that because he's the most efficient on the court. Like, he.
Maybe.
Well, I just like his ideas, right?
I know.
I think they show great care. I think he thinks about us more than Bloomberg or de Blasio. They talk in terms that include us, but Yang talks directly to us. And he doesn't have the skills of a politician who's good at getting elected, right? We always talk about politicians who are good at getting elected, but their ideas are kind of hard to pinpoint or maybe even bad, but they always win re-election because their skills, fundraising, speaking, they're just excellent at it. Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham.
Right. I mean, you were talking, of course, about this kind of eternal split between pencil pushers and technocrats versus the people who are out there, shaking hands and kissing babies. I mean, this is part of politics forever. But I also am, I guess, for Yang, as someone who does rely on young people and someone who does talk about ideas to benefit everyone, it is disappointing that he didn't go down. He wasn't around here. And again, I might be wrong. Maybe he was. He just was not present in terms of any way I saw it. And again, if you go on his Instagram, there's plenty of content, and it's all from upstate, and it's all from his interviews on CNN or wherever. Like, there's a lot of content from all summer.
Obviously he's not pretending like he was here, but like, does that disqualify him from being a mayor, which is like a shitty job? I almost think he shouldn't take it because there is the culture of New York City mayor is a bad one. And I think like it's a job that it's a lose-lose situation. De Blasio is easy to blame for the awful year that we had. And when he was at his height of unpopularity, I feel like in the spring, I started watching his daily press conferences. And I think I talked about it on here. And I was like, yo, this is complicated. Yo, Albany is not helping him. And he's just like, look at my budget, dudes. And I'm like, oh, it's as simple as that even. Sure, he eats pizza the wrong way. He eats it like
he's from Boston.
He's from Boston. All these things, like, I kind of don't care about. And then the stuff I did care about, I realized that, like, so does he. But, like, his fight with Cuomo is, like, the dumbest political thing, right? Like, a mayor should not be fighting with the governor in any state, and they fight nonstop. And I'm like, that is politics 101, right? Your allies should be your allies. Like, fight the Fed, but don't fight each other, and that's all they do.
I mean, would I prefer Yang to de Blasio? Sure. Like, sure. And to other candidates that you mentioned? Sure. I mean, I have absolutely no love for Cuomo or de Blasio or Bloomberg or Giuliani.
And we won't have love for Yang if he becomes mayor, right?
Probably
it's a
not,
shitty
right?
job. Yeah,
Probably
it's a
not.
shitty job. Our subways are going to look the same. Big Miranda energy, actually. Like, I loved her platform. She was like, I'm not a politician, but one thing is, I know you guys take the subways and it's a big part of your life and we need to fix it. I'm like, that's enough.
I would much rather have had her, of course, than Cuomo. Like,
I voted for her, for sure.
Me too, yeah. I mean, and also because I was just hoping to derail a potential Sex and the City return.
I mean, it almost happened, but thankfully we're getting it.
Well, speaking of wars and government, So, you know, last episode we started out, and it was one day after the siege on the U.S. Capitol.
Trespassing, siege, riot. It's hard to figure out.
Protest, break, B&E, whatever you want to call
That was not Chuck Norris, man. That was not Chuck Norris.
I don't think that's Chuck Norris. But, you know, we recorded, I would say, less than 24 hours after that event transpired. And at that point, we had seen a lot of the surreal images, just like everyone else. You know, people in face paint vaping at congressional desks, and people stealing, you know, podia? Stealing podia? Is that the plural?
Yeah.
But, you know, basically,
perfect
people getting congressional merch and carting it out of there. And
Swag.
the Viking, the vegan king, who was in there with his horned headdress. It was a lot of
next
surreal.
to a Yeezy fan wearing those boosts.
It was a lot of surreal and comedic images that came out. But over the last week, we've learned that crowd of neo-Nazi clout demons and cartoonish characters were joined by some fairly ominous figures. There were guys in there in tactical outfits with bulletproof vests and stun guns and zip ties and flashbangs and bear spray, climbing equipment, you know, steel metal poles. And like, to me at least, there's another tone now that we avoided potentially something really, really gnarly. That we avoided only by virtue of luck in many cases. This is a narrative that's emerging, and I'm not saying I disagree with it, that we could have seen members of Congress killed or beaten or taken hostage, that was all in play. And I do tend to agree with that.
We still might.
Right. I mean, but do you share the idea that this is not as funny as we first thought?
A little bit, I think, as you know. I think it's
You're like, it's still funny.
a little bit. It's never too soon for anything. And the details are scary, but also, like, you know, we saw open carry weapons at protests and those weapons used. Like, that to me is terrifying. We see machine guns at polling stations. Like, that to me is very fucking bad. And we escape a disaster there sometimes, most times. In this election, we escaped any sort of catastrophe. So hearing about like Molotov cocktails, zip ties, and like weapons being around, totally. I expect all that stuff. Did someone actually fashion a bomb? I bet, you know? And like, I don't think that is the story that we should necessarily take away from this. So I do think it's still kind of humorous because they're just morons who are mostly like the optic we have in our faces is of this Viking. I'm like, what would we have done without this Viking? Like, he surely took the bullet, the Ben Simmons bullet for his entire crew, right? It's just like a bunch of Vikings. I'm like, I saw one Viking, to be honest. But
there's only one Q white supremacist Viking in the mix, and it happened to be him.
I mean, they're all halfway Vikings, but like, he was a full-on Viking, you know. He had done a lot of push-ups the night before, but like,
got those pecs right for the siege.
Yeah, man, he got his ink right, he got his pecs right. Someone had to do his face paint. Maybe he did it himself. I don't know, but I just think that so the agenda now is to get Trump out of office either within this next week or soon after, so he can't run again. And there's certain things that we want. Him being ineligible as a politician is something that Democrats want, I think, with just cause, maybe, probably, but because he's the worst. But I think the framing we're hearing about this is something I kind of try to parse with like calmness, because it's like, there were zip ties, there were Molotov cocktails. I'm like, That's it? Of course there's zip ties and Molotov cocktails. Was there knives? I bet. Was there a gun somewhere? For sure. And the information we know about politicians barely escaping death at these people's hands or a confrontation is harrowing, right? But I'm like, guys, do a better job. Like, this all comes back to like a kind of a surreal situation that was brought on by either something nefarious or inaction, right?
Well, I think there is information, still emerging that shows that people knew about these threats. They knew people had maps. They knew
We knew
people
about
had
them.
weapons.
Yeah.
Right. But people knew this was going to happen. They knew that people were going to try
on
to break
Twitter.
into the Capitol.
Yeah.
This was a known fact that Capitol was going to be under attack, and there are many places in which the security breakdown can be pointed. We looked at the Capitol Police. The guy who's in charge of the Capitol Police said, "I told X and XYZ, and they did nothing," and that all deserves to be investigated. Like, if this was a known fact, if the FBI was being warned about like potential siege, assassination attempts, weapons, all this stuff, how come it ended up being in this vulnerable state? Like, that breakdown should be investigated fully. Sure.
And I think what we know is like kind of basketball related, right? Like Knicks related. It's like, well, you still have to do something. You have to call the National Guard. They don't show up automatically. You don't get a high draft pick automatically.
Well,
it's like,
apparently, this guy said he tried to call the National Guard.
and Trump said no. Of course,
He
Trump
said he tried
no.
to call 6 times.
Right. But you know what I mean? They should have been there. So now Trump has signed an emergency order where the National Guard will be there on Election Day. Like, that's what it took.
Well, I also think there's a reasonable argument that this was a de facto assassination attempt. Like, it's not a coup in the traditional sense.
There was no demands made. There was no political agenda.
Except there was a political agenda. It was literally to disrupt the certifying of Joe Biden as president. I mean,
That's different than a coup, though. That's a disruption, right?
Well, I'm not saying it was a coup because it was not going to change the outcome, and Trump was not going to become president because of that. But I am saying it was political. Like, they were there at a certain time and a certain date, intended to disrupt a specific event, and they stormed the Capitol to do it. And Trump directed them there. And so did other members of Congress. And, like, even as someone who viewed the outcome ultimately, despite like the death of a cop and several other people, as not being as bad as it could have been for sure, you look at it like, everyone knew there were these violent components here. Everyone knew this, that there were unstable, crazy people in this mix, and you directed them to storm the Capitol while everyone was in there in order to disrupt the certification of Joe Biden. Trump was also apparently calling like Tuberville or whatever his name is and telling him to stall. Like,
Yeah.
again, I can see it both ways. It's Trump just saying, yeah, go down there and mess with them. Or he was hoping they would break in and fucking kill people. Like, I don't know what he wanted. I don't
think he
anyone
would have
does.
been. I mean, there's footage of his crew watching it happen and them like doing dancing, like little silly dances in elation. But what I do think it's serious, and serious things can be joked about too. But like,
For sure.
I think like I want to give credit to the idea that there's people who just want to fuck shit up. And, we all know these people who are just like, I'm heated. I just want to break something. And I think a lot of this, what that we witnessed was kind of that, as opposed to like, obviously they're screaming that the election was stolen from them. But that is kind of like a really blank way of just saying like, we're mad that our guy lost, so we want to break something. And I'm sure a lot of smart people were in the crowd. Not Chuck Norris too, more Chuck Norris's. But there were people there who were just like, I really disagree with the way our democracy is conducted, and it needs to have an overhaul or be examined. There's people in there who
That
probably
sounds
talk
way
about
more
that.
coherent than anything I've heard from a single person who's been interviewed out of that crowd.
I'm saying, right? Like it's been maybe around a week since this happened, and we have not found anything. So this is sort of like we have not found evidence of voter fraud. We have not found evidence of a huge conspiracy. I think these people would say it. I mean, they've been saying everything.
Well,
in
I'm
plain
not.
sight.
What do you mean by a huge conspiracy?
Or just like-
specifically,
Yeah,
like in terms of
in terms
from
of
A to Z. How? What do you mean?
from a coup that was kind of set up from the inside, and Trump with an agenda to make this moment a specific mechanism that triggered one action after another.
But he sent them there.
Oh yeah, for sure. That happened, and he encouraged them.
He told them to be there, and then he sent them there. He said, "We're going down to the Capitol. I'm going with you." And then, of course, he went somewhere else. But
I mean, he started Charlottesville, right? Like
flight
he's
to the
been
very
doing this
end.
forever, and he's been telling people to like start fights at his rallies.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
this is
he
his
said,
thing.
"Be there on this day. It's gonna be wild." He got everyone riled up. He had other speakers like Rudy and Flynn. They got up there and got everyone all frothy. And then he said, "Head to the Capitol. Go. I'll be with you. Fight hard." I mean, he sent these fuckers. And
So I think it's his fault, and that's why I think has every right to remove him and put
okay,
these
so
people.
now, okay, right. So here's my next question to you. Sorry
Okay.
to cut you off there.
Yeah.
If he sent them and he knew what they were capable of, because they knew who's in that group, his people, especially Flynn, especially Eric Prince, they're attuned to what's going on amongst militias. They're attuned to like QAnon. They're attuned to right-wing internet. You know, the places where these guys like fester online, they're doing this shit in public. They're there talking about having maps and shit like in plain sight. So like they knew what groups were congregating there. Some of them, like Clarence Thomas's wife, gave money to one that was bussing people in. So my point is, they knew there were dangerous individuals in this crowd, and they sent them down to Congress to storm it while Joe Biden was being certified. Like, I'm not saying it's a conspiracy specifically, but man, he sent lunatics to go disrupt the certification of the next president. Like, he did that shit.
And what I'm glad for and thankful for is he is so bad at stuff that if this bit played out exactly how Trump Stakes played out, how his golf courses in Ireland played out, how this Operation Warp Speed played out, unfortunately. He has this idea being like, it's Warp Speed, we're going to get this vaccine, here's the vaccine. And everyone's like, okay, now what? He's like, oh, nothing, I have no plan. It's just here, right? So this is it. And thankfully, in this situation, it seems like that's what happened. Because if he had directed them to do something else, that thing probably would have happened. But he was just like, storm the castle. And they're like, we're storming it. He's like, nice. And it's like,
I mean,
but
there's
where
no
do these
way
stakes go?
that someone didn't say to him, you know, if these guys go down there, from what we're hearing, they might kill Pence. They might hang his ass. They might
And
catch
he would
Pelosi.
just probably say, like, it's not my fault. If they do it, they do it.
I'm agreeing with you. I don't know that he's like, yeah, sick, kill his ass. Maybe. I mean, maybe. Who knows? I have no clue. But I don't see him saying, that would be horrible. I hope that doesn't happen. Maybe I'll call this off.
I mean,
Because he didn't.
figuring
and
out
they
the
knew who
intent-
was there.
I think figuring out the intent of a 74-year-old Donald Trump is like a fool's errand, right? Because I think, like, hypothetically, this gross thought. Let's say someone died.
I mean, someone did die.
No, like a politician, like a target died, and he, at first, this
Right,
is
say they
gross,
string up Pence.
awful, right? And I think he'd be like, yeah, do it. And then when it happens, he'd be like, why'd you do that? Like, he is a very, very stupid man. And I think his talents don't lie here. And I am not giving him any credit here.
I don't know, man. I think he was pretty fine with sending wildly dangerous people
Oh, he's fine
to
with that.
storm the Capitol, and I think he was fine with the results, whatever they were going to be. And I do think, I mean, I think he should be impeached. The idea that he hasn't been removed from office after pulling this bullshit, like, you just got to kick him out. And I
want them to do it too.
They're talking about it later. I don't think this is a time for unity. This idea that, like, okay, the whole storming of the Capitol, and it's time for unity. I disagree. I think these guys who encouraged this and advocated for the storming of the Capitol and argued that the election was stolen, I think these people should be held accountable.
And McCarthy and all these enablers, Steve Nash too, all these enablers should have to answer questions to exhaustion, because I think
Like Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz should
Expel his ass, boot his ass out of Congress.
figure out what's constitutional and do as much as you can. And
This shit was crazy, and there's also this urge right now to like, all right, let sleeping dogs lie, or what, More Trump people will come and try to kill. Fuck them.
yeah,
Fuck them. You don't say we're not going to try to seek justice or do the right thing because Trump's maniac frothing legions will come and try to murder us. Like, that's a threat.
and I also don't think that this is something that will just go away. I think you have to draft good players. You have to make right decisions. And now that Biden has the House, the Senate, and the White House, he should do stuff. And my biggest worry is that he's going to be like, I just wanted to get back where we shake hands and we can have a lunch after debating policy. And I'm like, be swift, have intent, and do something.
This is when you let the hands go. I mean, you've got the presidency, both houses.
2 years.
And
Yeah.
for 2 years, you let the hands go. You have to shred the Republican Party. You have to destroy them.
I want the electoral to go away, and I want them to pack the courts.
And I want Puerto Rico, and I want Washington, the states. Like,
Yep.
you have 2 years to try to fix this losing culture.
Yep. Do those handful of things quickly, succinctly, and with intent.
Go out there, draft Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. You
Yep.
got 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. Try to get R.J. Barrett and Kevin Knox by any means necessary.
All right, Republicans are back in power.
At least we
Children
can,
are still in cages.
At least we can have lunch together.
Well, a magnificent basketball segue. So everyone is up in arms about the disappearance of Kyrie Irving, the net superstar who has disappeared off the grid, they say. So for several games, no one seems to know where he is. He isn't playing. There's no plans for him to even play in games coming up. A video surfaced of him apparently at his sister's birthday party in New Jersey. He's just kind of there, clapping, did a little dancing. But the basketball punditry they're heated.
They're coming
People are
at
heated. They're mad at Kyrie.
people. Know this song, man.
What's the story here, man?
Well, I think we don't know that much about Kyrie, and he told us he doesn't talk to pawns, and I consider myself a pawn, so I won't know what
Steve Nash, pawn. Kevin Durant, pawn.
Yeah, the NBA, a bunch of pawns. I mean, he's not wrong, but I think he is an interesting guy, and I always kind of side myself or try to see his point of view, and usually I end up there after thinking about it. And at first I was like, this is kind of foul. Like, he's being, again, petulant. And then it took me a second to put myself in a situation and be like, oh, I'd do the same thing. And I would ask all my friends and relatives to do the same thing. If their work environment is dangerous, leave. Don't ask questions.
I think Kyrie's behavior here is obviously abnormal.
For sure.
And his behavior on Instagram when he was going live saying, I want to post up 9 times, rapping, spitting bars. He's been acting weird.
Yep.
For lack of a better word, he's been acting weird. Mm-hmm. And we know how he felt about the bubble and his skepticism towards that entire endeavor, from the standpoint of both players and both being like a young black man. Mm-hmm. And I think we viewed Kyrie's stance as a bit different after things happened in the bubble. And, there was another case of police brutality, or it was either that the police were not convicted, and you had the Milwaukee Bucks decide not to play, and the bubble was jeopardized. And I think a lot of people said, well, Kyrie was right. Mm-hmm. Kyrie had his instincts were correct. At the same time, this reminds me kind of when they arrest a serial killer, and he's got a bunch of like bodies in his crawl space. And they're like, but is he crazy? Is he insane? Like, well, of course he fucking is.
I saw Mindhunter.
Like, of course he's crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Kyrie is crazy, but like, of course there's something going on. Like, what's going on with Kyrie? I don't know, but of course there is. He's not just bailing on this because of no reason. Like, he clearly feels a certain way. There's obviously something going on. So to be mad at Kyrie and shitting on him when we're supposed to have this newfound awareness of mental illness and be more understanding of what people are going through, specifically athletes, and DeMar DeRozan and Kevin Love were lauded for being honest about these things.
Paul George was not.
Paul George was not. I mean, we know there's something going on with Kyrie. Why don't we chill out? This is between him and his employer and his teammates and his coach. It's got nothing to do with us.
Yep. I think so, and I agree. It's like Kyrie's world is loud, and I think I fear the Peter Luger's phenomenon with him. He's still at the peak of his game. The minutes he played this season were unbelievable. He's like an MVP candidate player. He just slotted in and did his Kyrie damage. And the minute those skills diminish, as they will with time, we're going to come at him harder. And I just think he's like a unique person with lots of thoughts that I align myself with. But giving him the space, I think, is something that we can do, but we won't do. I mean, we saw this with we gave Kevin Love the space, but we didn't give Paul George the space, who explicitly told us there was something wrong. Like, he was not right. And now he's the biggest villain in the NBA. And let's not forget these two players steered their own career paths. So people do not appreciate that at all. They're disloyal. They fled New York for sure, and to greener pastures. And
not Kyrie. He came to New York.
Yeah. Well, yeah. His New York was Poughkeepsie. And chasing hypocrisy sucks, right? But like, the Celtics can't even put a team on the court. Jason Tatum has COVID. Kyrie Irving is like, this is broken. We don't have the safety procedures in place for this to be safe. I'm out. These are just games. Maybe, right? He left for personal reasons. But as we're seeing the NBA, maybe as we record, we're going to find out the NBA will be postponed or maybe even canceled or maybe not. But we're seeing a lot of players coming down with this virus, and Kyrie is taking whatever he takes to heart. And as we're seeing his company kind of have structural issues, I can assume he sees the same thing.
You know, when we have this collective outrage towards Kyrie Irving or James Harden, like there's rumors of Ben Simmons took a car back from New York to Philly because he wanted to
be at home.
Whatever it was.
Yeah.
I don't even know the details because I could not care less about all these things. I could not care less. Yeah. And a lot of that criticism is typically cloaked in the idea that the sports media speaks for the ticket buyer. They speak for this fictional family, the Joneses, who got their tickets and loaded up the station wagon.
How'd they get tickets to the game?
You know how they got tickets to the game. Right. And they packed up the station wagon. Little Johnny's there in his Kyrie Irving jersey going to see his hero. And they get to the game.
And he's not playing.
And he's not there. And poor dad's got to explain to his son why Kyrie let him down and how they'll try again in 2 years when they skimp and save the money for NBA tickets. And
they're expensive.
They drive back to Poughkeepsie. But this doesn't happen right now. It's not happening. There are no fans. There's no one in these arenas. So that hollow conceit that the sports media speaks on behalf of the little guy, the person who's buying tickets, who deserves the players to be there, it's not there. Not there. So who are you speaking on behalf of? Who is your moral indignation speaking for?
The people who pay for high-speed Wi-Fi to steal League Pass from a Russian website.
Like who are you pretending to be offended for?
Oh, it's fantasy owners, right?
That's what I'm saying. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just, outraged that Kyrie's not talking to Steve Nash. What the fuck do you care, man? Oh, because you just feel like watching him play? I hear you. Yeah, he's great to watch. I wish he was there to play against the Sixers. That would have been cool. I agree. But, like, we can't even use this hollow idea that we're speaking for anything other than our own selfishness.
Listen,
like if someone doesn't show up to work at a restaurant and you like that restaurant and the chef doesn't show up for a week, you're not out there screaming about the chef might have taken a car somewhere. Who fucking cares? Grow up.
I passed up Paul George in the second round of my fantasy league, who's balling, who's an MVP candidate for Kyrie Irving. Now I'm losing all my matchups, man. Heads gotta roll. They're ethically unsound, man.
He said he's not playing for personal reasons.
Yeah.
What else do you need?
Yeah.
He explained it.
Yeah.
It's not a hammy.
But I don't believe we are better than we were. I do believe we are better than we were, but I don't believe we're good yet, and myself included. Like,
I think you're good.
I was fishing, and I got a big striped bass.
I mean, you are perverted by short king culture, but other than that,
perverted short monks. I went fishing and got a trash fish, tilapia. But I don't think I'm that much better than I was, even with all these great things that happened, like this positivity, body positivity, BLM, mental health awareness, all these things. Like, I'm moving slowly, but it takes time for all this stuff. A 74-year-old man does not change, right? And people don't automatically change. So to hear this outrage about Kyrie, I almost believe they're not even mad at him per se. They're mad at the idea of him, and because,
like, the idea of an athlete
yes,
who doesn't care about money, doesn't care about winning, and is able to basically shrug and say, "I don't feel like it."
Yep.
That does upend our sort of understanding of sports, where it's like, you are being paid millions, therefore I get to yell at you because you are rich and I am not, and that gives me the right to scream at you from the stands and demand that you do certain things. And if he says, "Cool, I won't be paid," then what do you have over Kyrie?
And
if he doesn't care about missing shots and not being clutch, what are you going to say?
And this is intense, but the optics are not lost here. He's a black athlete, a young black man who's successful beyond mine and all of our wildest dreams. He's a legend, and
the best ball handler and difficult shot maker in NBA history.
And he's underpaid, and I can't even imagine the amount of money he has. I can't even fathom it, and I still think he's underpaid. I think BLM was important because it kind of unearthed our the DNA of where we went wrong and how we were conceived as an idea, as a culture or society. And Kyrie, to me, in my opinion, is advanced. And he not only sees it, but he acts upon it. And his stakes are that good, right? Peter Luger stuff. His stakes are the best in town. So I want him to wield this power because he still has the best stakes in town to kind of cast light on this. And I think I don't think anyone exposes themselves because it's a cultural thing, but to be mad at him takes a certain kind of point of view.
I don't even feel the need to ascribe philosophical tenets to anything that Kyrie is doing. It's not. It may be because of safety protocols. It may be because of the siege on the Capitol and the juxtaposition between the treatment of protesters during Black Lives Matter protests. Maybe.
Right.
I don't know. He didn't tell us. It could be that he's just sick of playing basketball. He doesn't feel like it right now. He's not into it. He wants to go and celebrate his sister's birthday.
Absolutely.
I don't know. And I also just do not care.
Yeah, this runs concurrent with my opposite thought that sometimes people just want to fuck shit up and just break something, and they attach meaning to that to justify it. And maybe this is the same idea but a different version of that, where he's just I don't like this, I miss my family, this NBA season doesn't look right, I'm going to leave to do me and take care of myself and my family. That's good enough for me.
Well, I think we can do a better job having sympathy for athletes, whether it's James Harden looking at butts, whether it's Ben Simmons allegedly wanting to eat a meal or sleep in his own bed, or Kyrie vanishing, going off the grid,
Or-
like an episode of Alone.
Gordon Hayward having 4 children and being questioned by the cops every day.
But, they did not sign up for this. They did not sign up for these bizarre, COVID protocols. They didn't sign up to be traveling around the country during a pandemic. We're looking at the league and it's in shambles. They did not sign up for this. And we can always say, yeah, but you're making $22 million a year. Just do your job, man.
Or these are
They
the
didn't
terms
sign
of
up for
the
this.
work. But
They were
these-
making $22 million anyway. They didn't make $22 million because they were going to do this whole rigmarole of endangering themselves and others and then testing positive and not being able to play. They didn't sign up for this shit. They're doing it because they have to.
Right. It's like if your employer tells you you have to go into work and you cannot work from home, or else you just won't work there. It's like, right, I'm going to go in because I need the job. And this is an interesting thing because the players have everything we want in basketball, right? Like, we tune in to watch Kyrie Irving and not necessarily that big Nets energy, the Jersey energy, right? And so they have a considerable say here. And like, if you are the star employee at a company, like, you can take a private plane to see your friends in Las Vegas and take 2 days off after the All-Star break. Like, you are that valuable to your company. And I think the leveling of everybody's experience is kind of like where we get into trouble a little bit. Like, we're all either with or without a lunch pail. And to view Kyrie's experience as our own experience is a mistake that I make and I think other people make, being like, I wouldn't do that. I'm like, I'm sure you wouldn't. But like, Kyrie's not you. And
And also, 99.9% of NBA players are there.
yeah. I mean,
Kyrie is not exhibiting normal behavior for any professional athlete. It happens every now and then. We know about all these places. When your boy Larry Sanders wanted to go skating and left the league, that was weird. We talked about it all the time. It was an anomaly. When Ricky Williams walked away from football, it was an anomaly. Kyrie's behavior is not unprecedented. It's just not what we see all the time. Like, let's acknowledge that this kind of stuff happens. Maybe he'll come back, maybe he won't. But like, either way, it's not scandalous. It's not immoral. He's not a bad person. Like, I don't know. I just feel, after seeing everything that's the players have basically been subjected to, not only this season but going into the bubble, the climate of Black Lives Matter surrounding the whole league. You have literal white supremacists and guys carrying Confederate flags busting into the Capitol and running around pooping on the walls. And you're going to be mad at Kyrie Irving. You're going to be pissy about Ben Simmons taking a car to Philly. Like, a little perspective would be nice.
I mean, our country is founded on the idea of protest, and like, protest has kind of changed the way we think about things. And Kyrie Irving is protesting, right? Like, I mean,
maybe
we don't know, right? He hasn't said anything, but like, he has protested before, in regards to the bubble. And I think, like, I always, broken record here, but I always want to know what people care about. And we don't quite know what Kyrie cares about, but a lot of shit happened when he decided to take some time off from playing. And we can only assume it's related to that, the national news and, the NBA news, that players were contracting the COVID at a higher rate than anybody contracting the virus was a bad thing. But unfortunately, we won't know until he comes out and says something. But we're pawns, so we may never know.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, so I saw you tweet, I don't know, yesterday or something like that you thought they should cancel the season, and I feel like you said that before the bubble started too.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, what brought you to that conclusion?
I mean, it's sad because I love all these games. I love talking about hoops. I enjoyed the bubble. I'm enjoying this, but putting these players at risk is, I think, a really bad thing. And watching all these players go down, Jason Tatum has COVID, Seth Curry has COVID, and Karl Anthony Towns' mom, he still talks about it. It broke his heart. And when he went down with that dislocated wrist, he was in tears, man. He's had a rough year. So I think, like, to the detriment of our entertainment and our joy, I think we need to protect these players. And I find no logistical reason to support playing this season, because if we took some time off, it kind of like bleeds into closer to next season. If we took 3 months off, 2 months, like, are you going to make the situation safer? Are we going to recreate the bubble? We already talked about how the bubble didn't work psychologically for a lot of these players, and even LeBron was like, never again, man. That was awful. So I don't see the players union getting behind that. And at that point, we might as well just like call it and like wait for the world to kind of stabilize and then come back with a better plan.
I don't think you should cancel the season. I think you certainly could postpone it.
Yeah.
I just don't think it makes sense to say, okay, we're not doing this season.
But a year's not that long.
But I also just don't see the point. You can't be like, okay, you're off your contract, and now this guy, like you have to just pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to get confusing. They say the vaccine won't hit the population till the summer, and at that point, we're kind of close to 2022.
Right. I just mean because people have contracts and things like that, you can't say, oh, you had 1 year on your deal and you played 8 games, now you're a free agent. I think you just have to say, we'll resume this when we can.
But can't they just fix that? Like, this is just language. They could just come to an agreement of how to take care of everyone's contract.
I just don't see the necessity. I think you just say, okay, cool, we're going on hiatus. Like, what's the point of having like another off season and other things? I
mean, it's language, like hiatus, cancellation. Like, if they just say we're going to resume when it's safe, it could mean 2 years or it could mean 2 weeks.
True. Yeah, I just wouldn't say, okay, we're done with the season after 11 games. I would say, all right, let's hold off. I don't know that they should or shouldn't. I don't have a strong opinion on it because I do think that the rates of COVID around America right now, like, these guys are going to be getting sick anyway. And I know that's just a grim way of looking at it. I just mostly mean, like, I don't know. You can say we're not going to play. I'm not even sure if guys are getting coronavirus because they are traveling and because they are, in a member of their team. Like, they are at some point, but I don't know. I mean, my biggest issue here is, like, it's not even about safety because we know that so many people are getting COVID, is what I'm saying. I feel like these guys being tested on whatever it is, almost a daily basis, they're less likely to get sick than they would if they were just not doing anything for the next 5 months.
That's assuming a lot, though.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I feel like the level of testing that goes on in the NBA is just so much higher than the general population. But I'm also not saying that they should necessarily be subjected to living like this either.
Yeah, I just think it's unsafe, and I think it's true that the numbers are spiking everywhere, but they're being put in a precarious situation, sort of like these politicians who are testing positive for COVID after being sequestered with members of their house that refuse to wear masks. And now the stupid debate is like, I sound like Fran Lebowitz over here, but now the debate that I get annoyed at is, you would have gotten COVID somewhere anyway. How could you say it was because you were in a room with me for 4 hours? And it's like, well, probably because I was negative yesterday, I was positive today. It's like, but everyone's getting it. And like, it's an endless discussion where, like, that room should never have existed for many reasons, that where all the politicians were being protected. And in a way, like, this NBA should not exist. Like, it's indoors. It's different than football, which is outdoors, and even that's a disaster. They are not breaking any rules. They were given guidelines and they followed them, and they're trying to run a company to generate money because they need money to survive, whatever. But
I mean, none of these people really need money to survive. They just want more of it.
or like contracts, that have they
I'm
refuse to
talking about
rework
the
contracts.
owners. I'm talking about the owners. Like the owners.
But you
the
know what
owners
I
don't
mean.
Need,
like,
these guys are billionaires. They don't need money. They just want it.
Beyond that discussion, true. But like, I'm saying they're doing this for money. Like, they,
Oh yeah. Well, it's only money, nothing else. It's just
yeah,
money.
to honor contracts, and I don't even think it's like it's navy blue evil. I just think it's like a reality that Silver has to deal with, and by the time we release this today, maybe he's come to a solution. But it's not like the sunset or the orbit of the Earth or gravity. Like, you can change these parameters of money so everyone is in agreement somehow. Just like go back to the drawing table. But I don't think this NBA this week was a disaster. They had to cancel games. They made the Sixers play inexplicably. Joel Embiid was on the bench with Seth Curry. I'm just like, do we need to do this? Like, these are people we can take care of and not put in harm's way instead of
I guess my thing is not like they should be playing, because I agree with you. It was just for money. I didn't think they should have started it this early. I thought they should have started it, in like March or something, like down the line, once you get closer to understanding how the vaccine is going to be working and distributed, etc. I thought starting in late December made no sense at all from
That's
a
weird.
pandemic stance.
They rushed it for those TV Christmas games, right? Or New Year's. New Year's.
Sure looks like it.
Yeah. I mean,
So I'm not in favor of the season even being played. I'm mostly thinking like, all right, if you got it up and running, do you say, all right, we're going to suspend it for 2 weeks. We're going to review our safety protocols. We're going to make sure that no one has COVID when we restart, and try to change the rules and still do this. I mean, that's like one way of approaching it.
Yeah.
But it's also, what are those rules? What does that entail?
yeah.
Okay, so now when you're on the road, you can't see anybody but your teammates. You have to sit in your room by yourself. What about at home? Are you allowed to see your friends at home? No, can't see your friends at home either. Like, I don't know how you do an indoor sport where people travel together and fly together, and they also have their own lives at home.
Yeah.
And like, how do you ask them not to have that?
Yeah, or go through different experiences of their own life. Like, I think Seth Curry is a different person than Danuel House, and I think they would react to the world around them in different ways. And not so the farthest hippy dippy place I go to is like, I think it's important to have some normalcy, because as a country, as a world, like we're having trouble. So have the NBA games on is a big help to me, especially. Like, I love it. I just love it. I love tuning in. Something feels like a memory of what normal is. I appreciate that. Like, to hear Mike Breen's voice is like pretty amazing. But then the opposite would just be like the strict logistics of it. And like,
Well, the other alternative, one that I was initially against, but seeing how bad they are at rolling out the vaccine, I'm like, all right, just fucking vaccinate these guys.
well, this is what doctors are saying now. It's like the priority, the rollout is so bad. Just vaccinate everybody you see in front of your face. Like, there's no priority anymore.
From what I've heard, there are an astounding amount of vaccines just being thrown out.
Yeah,
because
they're
they're
just
not
dying.
being administered, and they are, they're just basically expiring, and they're no good, and they're being tossed. At this point, it's like, I'm not saying just start a line and everybody gets it. You should still try to get it to more people and do that.
For sure.
It's like, whoa, the NBA players are jumping the line. Well, yeah, but like,
Just get it to everybody.
get everybody the goddamn fucking vaccine.
Yep. No surprise. Like, back to our previous conversation, it's like, okay, all of our Vikings are in the White House, but they're all expiring. They're filing out peacefully, and it was no surprise that this administration would fuck this up. But I'm with these doctors who are just like, Yeah, just like instead of throwing these vaccines out, just vaccinate anyone who wants one. Be like, people who show up at restaurants late and be like, "Do you guys have any leftover food?" It's like, we sure do.
I agree. Hey, I was scrounging around in the dumpster out there. You got an extra vaccine or two? Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we have 500.
Enjoy.
Yeah, and
Because to your point before, they were supposed to do what, 20 some million, and they got under 3 done by the end of the year. It's just an absolute farce.
it's going to take years and years, and the vaccines being squandered is like heartbreaking, right? Like just them expiring on shelves in refrigerators is like super infuriating.
You know who I think has the solution here?
Who's that?
Brad Stevens.
Oh, so when we get him on the pod, we're going to be like, what do you feel about isolation plays for Jason Tatum? Will Jason Tatum stop growing ever? And what do we do with these leftover vaccines?
Like, beyond the fact that, your ISO game is very reminiscent of an amateur AAU coach, like, how do we vaccinate the population of the globe?
Are you going to run for president again?
And that pod, my friend, will be
Would
perfect.
be perfect. It would dethrone this pod, which is
Cookies.
I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.